The town of Oakhaven was the kind of place where everyone knew what color your front door was, but nobody knew what happened behind it. Elena was a kind, hard-working woman who had spent most of her life helping others. When she met Mr. Sterling, it felt like a fairy tale. Mr. Sterling was a tall, quiet man with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets and a smile that was rare but genuine. He was incredibly wealthy, living in a mansion on the edge of the woods that looked like a modern castle. But what everyone in town talked about weren't his golden gates or his marble floors, it was his 3 cars. In the long, glass-walled garage at the front of the property sat 3 magnificent vehicles. The first was a ruby red speedster, a car that looked like it was made of frozen fire and could outrun the wind itself. The second was a midnight blue sedan, elegant and silent, looking like a piece of the night sky packed on tires. The third car, however, was a mystery. It sat under a heavy, dusty grey top. No one knew its color, its shape, or its year. When Mr. Sterling asked Elena to marry him, he was kind and honest. He told her she would have everything she ever needed. She would have the finest clothes, the best food, and a garden full of the rarest roses. But he had one rule. It was a rule so simple that Elena didn't even think to question it at first. He looked her in the eyes and said, "Elena, you may walk anywhere in this house. You may sit in the red car and you may ride in the blue car, but you must never, under any circumstances, touch the grey tap on the third car. You must never look under it, and you must never ask what is beneath it." Elena laughed, thinking it was a small price to pay for a life of happiness. "Of course, Arthur," she said, "your secrets are your own." And for the first year, life was perfect. They traveled in the red speedster to the coast, feeling the salty air on their faces. They took the blue sedan to fancy dinners in the city, the car gliding over the pavement like a ghost. Elena was happy. She spent her days painting in the garden and her evenings reading by the fireplace. She never even looked at the third car. It was just a shape in the corner of her eye, a dusty lump in a beautiful glass room. But as the second year began, the quiet started to feel a bit too loud. One rainy Tuesday, while Arthur was away on business, Elena found herself standing in the garage. The rain drummed on the glass roof, creating a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. Her eyes drifted to the corner. The grey tap looked different today. It looked heavy. It looked lonely. She remembered the rule: never touch, never look, never ask. She turned away and went back to the kitchen to make tea, but the image of the tap stayed in her mind like a splinter. Why would a man who shared his whole life with her hide a single car? Was it a broken old tractor he was ashamed of? Was it a gift for her that he had forgotten to give? Or was it something scary? The human mind is a funny thing. The more you are told not to think about something, the more it becomes the only thing you can think about. Elena began to notice things. She noticed that Arthur spent exactly 10 minutes every Sunday morning standing next to the covered car. He didn't move the tap. He just stood there with his hand resting on the fabric, looking sad. She tried to bring it up once during dinner. "Arthur," she started, "I saw you in the garage today. You looked upset." Arthur's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The warmth left his eyes instantly. "The rule, Elena," he said softly, but his voice had an edge like a cold knife. "Remember the rule." Elena apologized quickly, and they finished their meal in a silence that felt heavy, like the grey tap itself. Months passed. The curiosity became a hunger. Elena began to dream about the car. In her dreams, the car was made of solid gold, or sometimes it was a time machine, or sometimes it wasn't a car at all, but a cage for a dragon. She began to feel like the car was a wall between her and her husband. How could she truly know him if there was a giant, dusty secret sitting in their garage every single day? One afternoon, a massive storm hit Oakhaven. The power went out, plunging the mansion into darkness. Arthur was stuck in the city because the roads were flooded. Elena was alone with a single candle. She wandered the halls, the shadows dancing on the walls like reaching fingers. Without meaning to, she found herself at the heavy metal door of the garage. She pushed it open. The smell of oil and old fabric filled her nose. The ruby-red speedster glowed dimly in the candlelight. The midnight blue sedan looked like a deep pool of water. And there it was, the third car. The tarp was thick with dust, but she could see the outline of a steering wheel and a tall, boxy frame. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Just one look," she whispered to the empty room. "Just one look to stop the dreams. One look to make the curiosity go away." She reached out. Her fingers touched the rough, cold fabric of the tarp. She expected a lightning bolt to strike or a silent alarm to ring, but the house stayed quiet. She gripped the edge of the cloth and pulled. The tarp slid off with a heavy shoo whip sound, hitting the floor in a pile of dust. Elena gasped, dropping her candle. The flame flickered but stayed lit on the concrete floor. It wasn't a sports car. It wasn't a luxury limo. It was an old, beat-up, rusted green truck from the 1950s. The tires were flat. The windshield was cracked in the shape of a spider web. The paint was peeling like sunburnt skin. Elena felt a wave of confusion. Why hide this? Why make a rule about an old piece of junk? She opened the creaking door of the truck and climbed inside. The interior smelt of old peppermint and hay. On the dashboard was a faded photograph of a young Arthur, looking much thinner and wearing dirt-stained overalls, standing next to a kind-looking woman with the same rare smile Arthur had. On the back of the photo, it said, "Our first mile. Love, Mom." Suddenly, the garage light flickered and roared to life. The power was back. Elena jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing at the entrance of the garage was Arthur. He was drenched from the rain, his coat dripping onto the floor. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. "I told you not to look," he said, his voice trembling. "Arthur, it's just a truck," Elena said, stepping out and reaching for him. "Why was this a rule? I thought it was something terrible." Arthur walked over to the rusted leather seat and ran his hand over it. "This truck was the only thing my mother owned. She worked 3 jobs to buy it, so she could drive me to school and keep us off the streets. We lived in this truck for 2 years, Elena. Every night she would tell me stories about how one day I would be a king and have a fleet of cars." He looked at the ruby-red speedster and the midnight blue sedan. "I bought those to prove I made it, but I kept this one to remember who I actually am. I was afraid that if you saw it, if you saw where I really came from, you wouldn't see a Mr. Sterling anymore. You'd see the boy who slept on a pile of blankets in a rusted-out Chevy. I wanted to be perfect for you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She walked over and took his hand. "Arthur, I didn't marry the cars. I married the man who was strong enough to build a life from nothing. The rule didn't protect your secret. It just kept me from knowing your heart." Arthur looked at the truck, then back at his wife. For the first time, the quiet in the house didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. He realized that the rule hadn't been about the car at all. It had been about his own fear. The next day, the grey tarp was gone. The old green truck stayed in the glass garage, right between the red speedster and the blue sedan. It was still rusted, and the tires were still flat. But in the sunlight, it looked more beautiful than all the others combined. Elena never questioned the rule again, not because she was afraid, but because there were no more rules to follow. They finally had a home where every door was open and every story, no matter how dusty, was shared.